Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tangmen based on novel. So let's start. Nan Shui sighed gently and said, "He's much tougher than you imagine. This kid is bound to achieve lots of success in the future if he can overcome this psychological barrier. He'll definitely be a leading figure that can terrorize the entire continent. Perhaps these ordeals are the best whetstones to shape him into a great character." The rims of Nan Xiuqiu's eyes turned a bit red, and she said, "It's just that this is too cruel. The person he loves is unconscious, and the person who loves him died for him. If I were him, I would have already broken down." Nan Shui hugged her daughter and said, "This is why you're not him. You'll never reach the heights that he'll reach in the future. I just hope that you'll do your best to chase after him as you remain by his side. After some time, you'll discover that you've widened the gap between you and others of the same age, even though you find yourself lagging further and further behind him. Just like I said to him, you must always look forward." "Okay." Nan Xiuqiu seemed to understand something, and snuggled beside her mother. However, her mind kept on returning the teary look in Huo Yuhao's eyes before he left. As he unleashed his soul power, Huo Yuhao's speed was lightning quick. A formless protective barrier that was formed using his spiritual power helped to resist the strong winds coming from the outside world. No matter whether one used their naked eyes or any type of surveillance soul tool, they wouldn't be able to discover his presence in the air. Right now, Wang Qiu's words before she died kept on playing in Huo Yuhao's mind. Everything that she had left behind had already fused with his body. The sixth soul ring of Wang Qiu's Eye of Destiny couldn't be appraised using its limit, while the Skull of Destiny was an astonishing soul bone. After he completed his perfect fusion with these strengths that Wang Qiu left behind, he was enhanced until he reached another level entirely. This should be an extremely happy thing to any soul master. However, could Huo Yuhao really be happy? Dorma was in a deep sleep, but he had never once blamed Wang Qiu for it. When Wang Qiu sacrificed herself for him, he could clearly feel Wang Qiu's apology towards Wang Dorma. The more it was like this, the more tormented he felt internally. "I learned how humans love each other, but I didn't learn how to forget. I couldn't forget about you. Therefore, I came once I felt that you were in danger. This time, Dorma isn't by your side, and we aren't in the yin-yang love-querying valley. This time, I will not lose to her anymore. She is in a deep sleep, so there's no way she can compete with me. Actually, I like how you are now, because you won't resist, and just take everything in silence. How I wish I could spend eternity with you like this. Thank you, Yuhao, because you have finally told me that there is space for me in your heart. In the end, I didn't waste my experience of that love that humans have. Perhaps I have become more like a human at this point. Thank you, Yuhao. Perhaps this is the best outcome for us no matter what, we will never be separated again. Yes, we'll never be separated again. I've fused with everything from you. We'll really never be separated again." Huo Yuhao pursed his lips tightly. His immense spiritual power gave him an extraordinary memory. This was why he could clearly recall the entire process of Wang Qiu's sacrifice for him. Wang Qiu used the most extreme method to finally be together with him. It could even be said that she had forced him to be together with her. The sorrow he felt in his heart would never disappear. "Qiu, don't worry. I'll continue to live strongly for you and for Dorma. You are already a part of my body. By continuing to live strongly, it's the same as you being together with me. I'll protect everything that you've given me." After he finished muttering these words, he gradually retracted the sadness in his eyes. Yes, he had to be strong. It was only by doing so that he wouldn't let down everything that Wang Qiu had done for him. Huo Yuhao only wanted to do one thing right now from the depths of his heart. He wanted to go to the Clear Sky sect to see Wang Dorma. He had already lost Wang Qiu, and he really wanted to be by Wang Dorma's side and protect her. He wanted to stay with her until she woke up. However, he couldn't do so. At least not now. This was because he had something more important to do. He recalled what Wang Qiu had said to him at the final moments before she died. As the Emperor Beast and God Beast of Destiny, Wang Qiu had offered herself to save Huo Yuhao. This greatly affected the entire Great Star Doe Forest. There was bound to be some kind of reaction, and it might even catalyze a disaster. He needed to rush back to the forest. It was only by inheriting Wang Qiu's power of destiny that he could settle the core of this issue. The reason why Huo Yuhao didn't choose to return to Shrek City with Nan Qiuqiu and Nan Shui immediately was because he knew that he wasn't strong enough. Even though his spiritual power had been greatly enhanced, he still wasn't strong enough. He wanted to become even stronger. This process wouldn't take too much time either. He wanted to proceed towards a place which wasn't too far from where he had absorbed Wang Qiu's sacrifice. It was a place in the Sun Moon Empire. As Huo Yuhao flew, he called, "Brother Sky Dream." A streak of dim gold light flashed, and a figure appeared beside him. It was a handsome man with short white hair, curly eyebrows, and golden eyes. There were even golden halos around his body. Yuhao. The eyes of this youth looked a little lost, but they were also filled with comfort and gentleness. Yes, this was the human form of the Sky Dream Iceworm. When Huo Yuhao's spiritual power transformed from the concrete material realm to the concrete material realm, the Sky Dream Iceworm, Ice Empress and Little Snow Lady Spirit had all evolved. Their spiritual bodies were in Huo Yuhao's body. As Huo Yuhao's spiritual sea evolved, their abilities, or rather the strengths that they had been suppressing for fear of overloading Huo Yuhao's spiritual sea, were all released. This was also the reason why the Sky Dream Iceworm could adopt a human form and use his spiritual power as a foundation to materialize his form next to Huo Yuhao. At this moment, the ring on Huo Yuhao's finger that was formed using the Sky Dream Iceworm's spirit had already disappeared. Huo Yuhao said, "Brother Sky Dream, I'm fine. How far are we?" The Sky Dream Iceworm replied, "We should be going in the correct direction. That fellow lives in a forbidden region of the Sun Moon Empire known as the Evildemon Forest. Although it isn't as huge as the Great Star Doe Forest, it's still the largest forest within the borders of the Sun Moon Empire. It's located roughly to the west of the Jingyang mountain range that you've been to before. There shouldn't be any problem as long as you continue flying in that direction. With your current speed, you'll be able to see it in at most 2 hours." "All right. Thanks, Brother Sky Dream." Huo Yuhao nodded. The Sky Dream Iceworm sighed and said, "Do you still have to stand on ceremony with me?" "Yuhao, do your best. All of us believe that you are the best. You were right earlier. It's best to not let Qiu'e down by living well. To a certain extent, Qiu'e didn't die. She's only spending the rest of her life with you. You are her, and she's you." "Yes, I understand. I'll tough it out." Huo Yuhao nodded at the Sky Dream Iceworm again. The Sky Dream Iceworm gave him a comforting look before turning into a streak of golden light and fusing into his body. Yes, Huo Yuhao had to go to the Evildemon Forest, where the strongest soul beast in the Sun Moon Empire resided. There was an extremely strong soul beast species in that forest, the Evil Eye Tyrants. Their leader was the Evil Eye Tyrant King, who was also known as the Evil Emperor. He was also the only living creature over the past 100,000 years that dared to challenge the beast god Di Tian, who was extremely terrifying. Before Huo Yuhao proceeded to the Sun Moon Empire, the Sky Dream Iceworm, an Ice Jade Emperor Scorpion, had already advised him that he should go to the Evildemon Forest to hunt an Evil Eye Tyrant, which was of a sufficient cultivation to obtain his 6th soul ring. Evil Eye Tyrants were extremely strong spiritual type soul beasts. Huo Yuhao's spiritual power wasn't strong enough in the past, but he was qualified now, as his spiritual power had been enhanced. Right now, Huo Yuhao had already obtained his 6th soul ring due to Wang Qiu's sacrifice. However, he still needed to go to the Evildemon Forest. That was because his soul power wasn't at rank 60, but rank 70. After he finished fusing with the origin energy of Ultimate Ice earlier, his soul power had already crossed rank 60. Even he himself didn't know what rank his soul power was at. When he absorbed Wang Qiu's soul ring and soul bone, his spirit eyes fused perfectly with everything from Wang Qiu, as she had offered herself as a sacrifice for him. The immense power of destiny that the Emperor Beast possessed greatly enhanced his soul power. As a result, he immediately discovered that his soul power had reached another bottleneck again, the rank 70 bottleneck. Ever since he had reached rank 50, his soul power had been increasing at an extremely slow pace. He could only cultivate silently, as he watched his teammates break through to become soul emperors. With the origin energy of ultimate ice that the Snow Emperor's spirit put in him, and his perfect fusion with Wang Qiu, things finally paid off for him. As long as he obtained his 7th soul ring, he could finally make the jump from the mid-tier to the threshold of the top tier, and become a soul sage. Huo Yuhao was actually very impatient right now. He wanted to return to Shrek quickly. That was because he clearly recalled that Wang Chua had mentioned that the Great Star Do Forest would react harshly to her death. Whether he returned as a Soul Emperor or a Soul Sage wasn't just a concept. He knew that only he was capable of settling this issue. His abilities would carry an important weight in what was to come. That was why he quickly thought of what he had to do. After weighing the pros and cons, he decided to proceed towards the Evildemon forest, which was nearby, to obtain his 7th soul ring before returning to Shrek. Wang Chua's death was bound to leave the savage beasts in the Great Star Do forest astonished and furious. However, they still needed time if they wanted to take action. The savage beasts in the Great Star Do forest couldn't just attack Shrek City, as the strength of Shrek Academy would make them think twice. Huo Yuhao couldn't predict exactly what was going to happen. He could only try to deal with the situation through the most suitable plan. He was in fact a very emotional person. However, after he fused with this three-eyed golden lion skull, gusts of refreshing cold would seep into his spiritual sea and force him back to his rational state every time he lost control over his emotions. However, this wasn't a comfortable feeling, as his emotions were being suppressed by his rationality. However, Huo Yuhao couldn't resist this rationality in the current situation he was in. The crisis that Wang Chua had brought about was probably more terrifying than the Sun Moon Empire capturing hundreds of hostages. And he would be the most important figure in resolving this crisis. How could he possibly be relaxed? Just as the Sky Dream Iceworm had said, a huge forest appeared within his vision after he flew towards the north for less than 2 hours. The Great Star Do forest was very close to the center of the Doluo continent, and so it had a temperate climate, but this forest was closer to the north, and thus was coniferous. Furthermore, this coniferous forest was filled with dark grayish branches and leaves. It was extremely dark. Before entering it, a sense of suppression had already swept over him. This was definitely the Evildemon forest. Huo Yuhao slowly descended from the sky and landed on the ground. Soul masters with common sense wouldn't attempt to fly over a forest where there were many soul beasts. That was no different from suicide. Huo Yuhao didn't even stop to analyze the situation. He quickly entered the forest and immediately rushed toward the center of this forest based on the direction that he had determined while in the air earlier. This was self-confidence, his self-confidence in his own abilities. If it was 5 years ago, he would have been very cautious, and wouldn't have dared to venture into the forest. However, he was completely different now. He possessed immense spiritual power that surpassed even that of Title Doluor, and the abilities of the God Beast of Destiny. He was now completely able to summon good fortune and avoid calamities. He didn't need to deliberately unleash his soul skills. His spiritual power was already like a fine web that had been scattered, rapidly spreading into the distance. Very soon, Huo Yuhao discovered that the concentration of soul beasts here was greater than in the Jingyang mountain range. It was indeed the place in the Sun Moon continent that had the most soul beasts. To prevent wasting time through fighting, Huo Yuhao used to summon Ice Empress. A streak of golden light flashed, and a jade-green figure appeared beside Huo Yuhao. This was Huo Yuhao's first time seeing the Ice Empress in her human form. Her delicate looks made her seem less arrogant than the mature Snow Empress, but she was much cooler and more elegant. There were 4 streaks of demonic patterns on each of the sides of her captivating, silky white face. Her long dark green hair flowed behind her back, but her snow-white skin looked as if it were transparent. Jade-green light shone beneath her skin. When she appeared, the surrounding temperature started to decline. The Ice Empress' height was similar to Huo Yuhao's. She looked very cold, and her gaze only turned gentler when she looked in Huo Yuhao's direction. "I'll have to trouble you." Huo Yuhao nodded slightly to the Ice Empress. "Don't worry." The Ice Empress' voice was crisp and pleasant, but there was a chill in it that seemed to originate from her bones. She didn't do anything apart from advancing with Huo Yuhao. An aura that was special to the Ice Jade Empress Scorpion was also released from her body. She controlled the aura that she released very well. She didn't unleash it fully. With her cultivation before she fused with Huo Yuhao, she might really draw the evil emperor out if she unleashed her real aura. If that happened, there would be huge trouble. She only subtly exuded slight traces of the aura of 100,000-year soul beast, which managed to suppress and immobilize the nearby soul beasts, who were of weaker cultivations. The soul beasts that were closer to her were even worse off. Huo Yuhao could see through his spiritual detection that the soul beasts within a few thousand square meters had all retreated as he advanced. Those who were weak were even paralyzed and collapsed to the ground. Huo Yuhao wasn't willing to kill soul beasts because of Wang Qiu'er. This was why he used the Ice Empress aura. Although the Ice Empress didn't become his spirit like the Snow Empress and Skydream Iceworm, she could still materialize into a physical form through Huo Yuhao's spiritual power and remain outside of his body for long periods of time. She controlled her own bloodline and aura in Huo Yuhao's body, which helped Huo Yuhao conserve his energy. Right now, Huo Yuhao didn't lack spiritual power. When necessary, the Ice Empress could help him fight. However, she would have to use his soul power to do so. How much of her abilities she could use depended on how much soul power she could take from Huo Yuhao. After all, the Ice Empress had given him his Ice Jade Emperor Scorpion and not his spirit eyes. As for the Skydream Iceworm, he could help Huo Yuhao fight and use his spiritual power. However, he wasn't very adept at fighting. Rather than ask him to fight, it was better for Huo Yuhao to control his own spiritual power to fight. It was just that an extra form of intelligence and control could help Huo Yuhao do things ordinary people couldn't at special moments. Huo Yuhao was venturing into this forest in a straight line. What he needed to do now was use the shortest time possible to find a soul beast that was suitable to be his 7th soul ring. He would hunt and absorb the soul ring before quickly returning to Shrek. Very soon, he had already passed the outer regions of the forest, and the soul beasts around him gradually became stronger. 100-year soul beasts were everywhere, while 1,000-year soul beasts were occasionally present. It was just that they avoided Huo Yuhao and the Ice Empress because of the Ice Empress aura. 4 hours later. Yuhao, be careful. We've entered the core region of this forest. There will be 10,000-year soul beasts here. In addition, we might even face stronger existences. Perhaps you can find what you are looking for. The Ice Empress warned Huo Yuhao. Huo Yuhao also understood what she was saying and nodded. He replied, "Thanks for your help. I can take over from now." If the Ice Empress continued to stay outside, his presence would become too obvious. There was a high possibility that he might meet a strong soul beast as he entered the core region of this forest. Traces of the aura of 100,000-year soul beast might not deter the soul beasts in this region. On the contrary, it might even attract stronger soul beasts. This was why Huo Yuhao decided to adopt a low profile from here on out. A gentle halo formed distorted light patterns around his body. Very soon, he melded with everything around him, and his own aura was also blocked by this halo. It seemed as if he had vanished into thin air. He was still using his spiritual power to unleash his imitation. However, he was truly concealing himself right now. Even if he had to enter Sunrise City again, he could fly into the city without fear of being discovered. Unless he was scanned by a Class 8 surveillance soul tool, or something stronger, it was almost impossible to detect him. In addition, a Class 8 soul engineer was also needed to operate a Class 8 surveillance soul tool capable of detecting him. There weren't too many soul engineers in the entire continent that were at least Class 8. As for soul beasts, only 100,000-year soul beasts would be able to detect him through their own innate gifts. Huo Yuhao started to become more cautious as he ventured deeper into this forest. He didn't expand the area that his spiritual detection covered, but shrank it instead. The more experienced one was, the lesser bold he would become. The Evil Eye Tyrants resided in the Evildemon forest. They were rare spiritual type soul beasts, and were naturally more sensitive to spiritual undulations. As a result, Huo Yuhao didn't dare to be careless. His soft-heartedness and carelessness led him into a crisis which eventually cost Wang Qiu'er her life. He would rather be overly cautious than slip up again. He advanced carefully. Suddenly, there were chaotic undulations of soul power in front of him. There are soul beasts fighting. Huo Yuhao thought of something, and immediately stopped in his tracks. He quickly retreated a few steps and arrived beside a large tree. Using his imitation, he assimilated himself with his surroundings. His spiritual power had evolved to the concrete material realm. He was confident that only a savage beast could possibly detect him in this position. Otherwise, he couldn't be detected by weaker enemies, given his imitation, if he didn't shift his position. He could only consider himself unfortunate if the soul power undulations that were getting closer and closer to him came from the Evil Eye Tyrant King. If he was so unfortunate, he wouldn't have benefited from the sacrifice of an emperor beast. Rather, he would have suffered from the sacrifice of a divine mourning emperor. The chaotic undulations of soul power were getting closer and closer. Very soon, the creatures who were generating such undulations appeared within the region covered by Huo Yuhao's spiritual detection. There are indeed soul beasts fighting. Huo Yuhao squinted. It was exactly as he had predicted earlier. The soul beast that was charging in front had thick scales covering its entire body. This soul beast's lower limbs were extremely thick, and it moved in an upright manner. Its upper limbs were short and small. It only had 3 fingers on each limb, but it had sharp claws that shone with cold light. The thick scales on its body were dark blue, and there were at least 3 layers of them. They looked extremely thick. It was 4 meters in height, and seemed extremely muscular. Its head was also unusually large, and occupied 1/3 of its body. It dragged a thick, 3-meter-long tail behind it. Even though he came from Shrek Academy, Huo Yuhao still hesitated a little after he saw this soul beast. He quickly tried to recall everything that he had learned so as to recognize what this soul beast was. This was a devouring dragon, which was also known as a mini tyrant dragon. Tyrant dragons were considered one of the strongest among earth dragons. A mature tyrant dragon would grow to more than 15 meters in height. Above a 10,000-year cultivation, they could even reach more than 30 meters in height. They were definitely considered one of the largest soul beasts. Their physical offense and defense were also very strong, and they could compare to a true giant dragon. However, tyrant dragons weren't adept at long-range attacks. Their outstanding physical abilities also restricted them in other aspects. This devouring dragon in front of Huo Yuhao was very similar to a tyrant dragon in terms of its appearance. However, it was easy to tell them apart from their sizes. A devouring dragon was also very good at defense, but it was different from a tyrant dragon in the sense that its innate soul skill was extremely domineering. Its innate soul skill was called devouring heaven and earth. It was innately bloodthirsty. It could recover its energy and evolve by devouring its enemy after killing it. Even in the world of soul beasts, devouring dragons weren't too popular. That was because they were too brutal. In the eyes of a devouring dragon, every creature was just a target to kill and devour. It didn't matter whether one was a soul beast or a human, or whether one was a strong opponent. It would only stop its rampage after killing and filling its stomach. After this, it would enter a deep sleep. A devouring dragon grew much faster than ordinary soul beasts. In general, they needed only 1,000 years to reach the cultivation of an ordinary 10,000-year soul beast. However, they were usually killed when they met a stronger opponent due to their bloodthirstiness. Apart from a devouring dragon, there were also other types of soul beasts that relied on devouring their enemy's strength to evolve. One of the most notable and the strongest among these was the dark demon evil tiger. It was just that a dark demon evil tiger possessed extremely high intelligence, whereas a devouring dragon's intelligence was usually very limited, and it relied on its instincts to kill. As a result, devouring dragons were considered inferior to dark demon evil tigers. This devouring dragon could be considered quite large. From the color of its scales to the length of its tail, it was easy to tell that it was a devouring dragon with a cultivation in the 10,000-year bracket. As for its specific cultivation, it was roughly between 10,000 and 20,000 years. At such a level, the abilities of a devouring dragon were rather terrifying. However, this dragon seemed to be staggering forward as it advanced. The sides of its body had obvious burn marks, and it also looked very frantic. Evidently, whatever was chasing it had to be something stronger. An intense beam of red light was shot out from behind it at this moment. This beam of red light was extremely thick, at least a meter wide. Wherever it passed, all obstacles were instantly turned into flying ashes. The devouring dragon could evidently sense the threat to its life, and charged forward with all its might. At the same time, all its scales stood on end, and a layer of dark blue light was released from its body, forming a protective barrier. The beam of red light came too quickly, and it also covered a large area. While this devouring dragon reacted very quickly, it still took a grazing hit. As its dark blue light contacted this beam of red light, the protective light barrier distorted quickly, and started to undulate. After this, it burst like a bubble, and the remaining red light swept past the devouring dragon's back. A plume of smoke immediately burst up. This devouring dragon screamed in pain and rolled on the ground before it leaped up again. This time, it turned around and raised its head. As it opened its bloody mouth, it roared furiously into the sky. It seemed to know that it couldn't escape. From its stance, it was obvious that it was ready to go all out and risk its life. A ball of dark blue gas instantly took form in its mouth, and the center of this ball of gas was pitch black. It was its innate soul skill, devouring heaven and earth. Within a region that covered 100 meters, everything turned eerily dark, and a terrifying devouring power turned all life in this region into ash. Their energy was devoured regardless whether they were worms or plants. The strongest part of this devouring dragon's devouring heaven and earth was its attack. Just with this innate soul skill and its immense physical strength, a devouring dragon was able to gain an absolute advantage in front of most soul beasts. Huo Yuhao felt helpless right now. Just as this devouring dragon attacked, Huo Yuhao was immediately enveloped by its devouring heaven and earth, as he was only several dozen meters away. Huo Yuhao only felt that everything around him had turned eerily cold, and a strange force was maniacally sucking his life energy away. It felt as if his bones and flesh were about to be torn apart, and his entire body would be crushed into powder. Of course, this feeling only lasted for an instant before it ended. Huo Yuhao's imitation was deactivated, and a layer of gold isolated that terrifying, devouring aura. Of course, Huo Yuhao also revealed himself from his invisible state. His imitation wasn't an all-around skill. Against such an area of effect skill, he eventually still had to reveal himself. Huo Yuhao felt a little depressed. What's going on? I was just trying to watch this intense fight, but I'm being dragged in now. As a dim light flashed, Huo Yuhao revealed a helpless look on his face. He immediately sprang up into the air and drifted back like a snowflake. His greatest hope was that these two soul beasts hadn't noticed him and would continue their fight. This was why he tried his best to retract his aura and suppress his presence. However, it was a pity that soul beasts were most sensitive to humans. Just as Huo Yuhao revealed himself, a piercing scream resonated in the air. He also finally saw the figure of the second soul beast that had unleashed the earlier beam of red light. This soul beast had a very strange appearance. It was drifting in the air, and looked like a balloon. It was a pity that it wasn't a balloon, but a huge, bloodshot eye that was a meter across. There were clusters of brown stripes around this huge eye, and it had 6 tentacles that drooped onto the ground, which supported it in the air. As these tentacles dragged the eye, they left rotten ditches behind along its path. Out of these 6 tentacles, 3 were green, while the other 3 were red, and they were clearly separated. When it appeared, it was already staring at Huo Yuhao. Evil Eye. While it wasn't easy identifying a devouring dragon, it was much easier identifying this soul beast. That was because it was Huo Yuhao's target on his journey into this forest. However, Huo Yuhao was a little depressed, because this Evil Eye wasn't a pure spiritual type soul beast even though it seemed to already be as powerful as a sovereign king. It seemed to be a mix of different types. When he was in Shrek Academy, there had been a special lesson taught about evil eyes. Not all evil eyes possessed the same abilities. There were different species of evil eyes. Among the evil eye species, those with fewer abilities were actually stronger. This meant that the fewer innate soul skills they possessed, the greater their abilities. The evil eye Tyrant King only had one elemental type spiritual. It could use countless spiritual type soul skills with its immense spiritual power. In addition, the area that it could cover with its attacks was frightening, even exceeding that of the beast god, Di Tian. Right now, Huo Yuhao could tell that this evil eye possessed at least 3 different elements from the attack it had unleashed earlier, and from the colors of its tentacles. It was spiritual type, fire type and corrosive type. Its red tentacles were fire type while its green tentacles were corrosive type. Along with the huge, fiery red eye that it had, it was obvious that fire was its main element. An evil eye with a cultivation exceeding 10,000 years could be considered an evil eye tyrant. This evil eye tyrant was very well suited to its name. However, it was a pity that it wasn't what Huo Yuhao needed right now. Huo Yuhao needed a pure spiritual type evil eye. This meant that it had to be an evil eye that possessed the same innate gifts as the evil eye Tyrant King, or one that was mainly spiritual type, and had other auxiliary elemental types. It was best if it had as little of the other elements as possible. That scream earlier was released by this fiery evil tyrant. Its mouth was behind its pupil. As it screamed, it also drifted forward faster. The strange thing was that the devouring dragon, that was about to fight it earlier also turned around and faced Huo Yuhao with its mouth wide open. Surely not. They've turned from enemies to friends in such a short time, and are treating me as a joint target. Huo Yuhao furrowed his brow and also descended to the ground. After this, he saw that fiery evil tyrant's eye brightening up. Rings of strange distorted patterns started to spread from it. It was as if the surrounding brown stripes around it had turned illusory. Everything within a region that spanned several hundred meters in diameter started to distort. This was an innate soul skill of an evil eye, spiritual force field. Anyone whose spiritual power was weaker would be suppressed. Depending on one's cultivation and spiritual power, he would experience different intensities of dizziness, dullness, fatigue, dispiritedness, weakness, and other states. This was also one of the best crowd control skills that evil eyes were capable of. It was rumored that the evil emperor's spiritual force field could cover a region that spanned 30 kilometers. Simply put, he could cover half of Radiant City. When this fiery evil tyrant unleashed its spiritual force field, the devouring dragon charged towards Huo Yuhao. As it opened its mouth wide, a beam of black light that glowed dark blue at the edges shot towards Huo Yuhao. It was its devouring heaven and earth. Not only did these two soul beasts reconcile, but they even reached an agreement to attack Huo Yuhao together in such a short period of time. They were coordinating rather well too. This video will end here.